China and Russia together. Russia is the junior partner. Russia is, in fact, losing this war.
In Kyiv, U.S. Special Envoy for Ukraine, General Keith Kellogg, dismissed any talk of Ukraine collapsing like South Vietnam. Speaking at the Yes annual meeting, Kellogg said comparisons to America's past failures ignore Ukraine's unique resilience.
No, I don't have that nightmare at all, because Ukraine will survive. And the reason for that is because you look at the resiliency of the people. Look, I'll give you an example, and I actually put it on my phone. And it gives you, and I tell people, this kind of gives you an attitude of what this looks like going into the future. And there was a recent, it was put on TikTok or something, that the attacks had gone on. They were people, Ukrainian citizens were in the subway, and sitting in the subway, and they weren't huddled down, eating or drinking. You know what they were doing? They were singing their national anthem. You cannot replicate that. You can't.
Kellogg, a decorated Vietnam and Gulf War veteran, argued that morale and national will matter more than raw numbers. He reminded his audience that Napoleon once said, "Morale outweighs military power 3-1, and by that measure, Ukraine has already won." For Kellogg, the country's unity and determination set it apart from every conflict he has served in.
Napoleon Bonaparte once said, "Morale to physical is 3:1." What he meant by that was the heart of a nation counts 3 times as much as its military. You can't take that away from the Ukrainians. They've got it right. And so I've got great confidence in where they're going. And President in the United States has got global responsibilities, and every time.
But while praising Ukraine, the general turned his fire on the West. He accused allies of dragging their feet on sanctions, calling current enforcement toothless. Kellogg said only full economic warfare, from seizing oligarch assets to shutting down Russia's oil revenues, can force Putin to the table.
Scott Bessent, who's our Secretary of the Treasury, when I talked to him recently, he said if you look at sanctions, because now we're talking economics, and you graded them 1 to 10, 1 being low, 10 being high, we're probably at a 6, but enforcement's at a 3. So you've got to enforce the sanctions now. What that does, though, that raises your risk level. You've got, everybody has got to be willing to go and raise the risk level.
Kellogg warned that weak sanctions let Russia keep fighting a war of attrition. He ridiculed Moscow's claims of victory, saying its advances in Donbass are measured in meters, not miles. At the same time, Russia is paying what he called World War II-level costs, with more than 1 million soldiers dead or wounded, far higher than Afghanistan or Vietnam.
If Putin thinks Russia is winning, his definition of winning and my definition of winning are absolutely 2 different things. If he was winning, he'd be in Kyiv. If he was winning, he'd be west of the Dnieper River. If he was winning, he'd be on Odessa. If he was winning, he would have changed the government. Russia is, in fact, losing this war. Now, they may make movements and say, so, well, they're advancing in the Donbass region and the Donetsk. But if you consider advancing moving by meters, not miles, well, then, okay, that's successful. But at the cost they're having, it's enormous. And I don't think people truly appreciate it. It's a number.
The U.S. envoy said Moscow's desperation is now impossible to hide. Russia is cycling through wartime commanders, pulling tanks out of museums, and even flying in thousands of North Korean troops to fight on its front lines. For Kellogg, such moves show not strength, but collapse.
And by the way, you got to add in the junior partner in the Far East as well, which is North Korea. If Russia was doing so well, they would not have the need to bring in 10,000 North Korean troops to fight in Kursk and Sumy and places like that. They just wouldn't. That shows you that the Russian military has got a manpower and a fighting problem as well.
And behind Putin, Kellogg warned, looms Beijing. He called Russia the junior partner in its alliance with China, saying Moscow cannot survive without Chinese support. If Beijing pulled back, he argued, the war would be over tomorrow. For Kellogg, that makes Ukraine more than Europe's war. It is the front line of a global battle, one where China's role will ultimately decide Russia's fate.
I think when you look at the partners, if you look at China and Russia together, Russia is the junior partner. They're not the Chinese. The Chinese have got the economic strength, they've got the military strength, they've got the history clearly behind them, and the leadership behind them as well. And I think that if China cut off our support for Russia today, the war would be over tomorrow. I think they cannot survive without Russia's support.
General Kellogg's message was blunt. Russia is bleeding, Ukraine is holding, and China holds the key. But he insisted the West cannot hesitate. Stronger sanctions, tougher enforcement, and unwavering support are essential. For Kellogg, the war is not only about Ukraine's survival, but about defining the balance of power between democracies and authoritarian states in the 21st century.